Mayor, welcome to House Labor.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, representatives, for giving me the opportunity to speak and to be heard. Earlier today, I stood with my fellow mayors and town administrators throughout the state. We stood together in an almost unprecedented way. Together, if you add up the populations of our cities and towns, we comprise roughly 70% of the state's population. And we stood together unanimously in strongly opposing this overtime bill. Oftentimes in Rhode Island, we bemoan the fact that we're at the bottom of so many important areas. We're at the bottom with respect to employment. We're at the bottom with respect to roads and bridges. We're at the bottom with respect to the quality of our schools. And we have to ask ourselves, what do we need to do to turn our state around? The truth is that there are no easy answers. There are never easy answers. However, opposing this overtime bill offers us an opportunity to begin to turn our state around. Make no mistake about it, this is the most important bill and the most important vote that has come up in a very long time. This issue is bigger than the Pawsox. It has a greater economic impact than the incentives we're planning for the 195 land. This is an extremely big bill and an extremely important vote. The City of Providence, the cost to the City of Providence of this bill, I've estimated at $6.5 million. A lot depends on what happens at the negotiation table. But that $6.5 million is made up of two things. That's made up of savings that we won't be able to realize to the tune of roughly $5 million, and also additional costs that it imposes on Providence to the tune of $1.5 million. And the particular trouble with this bill is that this $6.5 million impact, if this bill passes, will essentially be written in forever. If we invested today, the amount that we would have to invest to have a payment stream of $6.5 million in perpetuity is roughly $76 million. That's the present value of this bill to Providence alone. The impact of this bill to the entire state, I haven't done the analysis, but I think we can all assume is much, much greater than that. Now, we have to look at this in context. Rhode Island already has one of the highest per capita costs for firefighter services of any state in America. Our overtime system is broken. Our overtime system is broken, and that's something that every single person in this room knows to be true. I have a firefighter in the Providence Fire Department who makes over $100,000 a year in overtime alone. This is in addition to base salary, in addition to benefits. This is simply unsustainable. And as an example, on average, Providence already spends about $24,000 each and every day on fire department overtime. That's much, much more than the $17,000 that it costs to educate a child every single year, for an entire year in the Providence public schools. And this bill, if it passes, will only add to the overtime costs that we sustain. Again, this is unsustainable. It's keeping us from making key investments in other areas that we have to make. And if this bill goes through, it will force us to consider raising taxes to pay for the additional costs that this provides. Now, there are a number of reasons to oppose this bill. It prevents cities from bringing their overtime costs under control, and it also prevents us throughout Rhode Island from bringing our fire departments in line with fire departments throughout the United States. This bill also increases overtime costs on cities and towns, overtime costs that are already bloated. And this legislation also pays firefighters for an additional 6 to 8 hours of overtime for their 4-day work week, even if they take vacation time or they take or they're off sick. They still can be paid overtime. Now, I'd like to set the record straight in a number of different areas. It's been said and has been repeated that I want our firefighters to work more hours and I'm not offering them any additional compensation. That is patently false. I've been at the negotiation table with the union and I've offered to pay them more. Now, I'm not going to negotiate this in public, but I will say that if you look at North Kingston, you look at Tiverton, and you look at Central Coventry, you see raises of 33%, 19%, and 19% respectively over a different span of years. I think that that is fair. And I look forward to continue to sit down at the negotiation table with the union to come up with something that's fair for Providence and fair for them as well. It's also been said, and it's also been repeated, that I refuse to negotiate with them. As I mentioned, I've been at the negotiation table with them since May 27, and I'm committed to remaining at the negotiation table until we either reach an agreement or we reach impasse. The irony of all of this is that if this bill passes, this will actually take us away from the negotiation table, and there will be no negotiations whatsoever. In conclusion, I'd like to say, and particularly for all of the firefighters present, that I understand the instinct to want to support our firefighters. They do great work on a day in and day out basis. I know they do it because I have seen it myself. They truly are heroes in so many different ways. But the truth is that our overtime cost and our overtime system is simply broken and it's out of whack. And unfortunately, they are overreaching on this overtime bill. And supporting our firefighters should not mean bringing our cities and towns to their knees. That's what this overtime bill does, and that's why I stood together with my colleagues in government from throughout the state earlier today to strongly oppose this bill. Thank you so much, Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Whip Edwards and then Representative Chippendale.
I don't have a question, except a comment. Mayor, I noticed you and Mr. Block have both misconstrued this bill. You have missed the most important part, and it is in the second sentence of the changed language. It says, unless otherwise agreed upon by the parties. And that is precisely what we are trying to do. We are trying to get the parties together, that if the city or town try to act unilaterally, this bill will be in effect. But the city or town has the ability to stem this off by, like Tiverton did, and negotiating in good faith with their bargaining. Thank you.
If I may respond, and a couple of things, Representative, with all due respect. And the first thing is that when we sit down at the negotiation table, if this law passes, this now creates the new baseline. And so if it doesn't cost us now because we've already negotiated around it, it'll cost us the next time we're negotiating the contract. And that's going to be the baseline. This has never been about refusing to come to the table. This has been about, once we do come to the table, how much negotiating leverage does the other side have? And this significantly empowers our unions with negotiating leverage. And that's what's so concerning about this. And the second piece of it is that the bill also has language that deviates from the federal standards. Under the federal standards, you have to pay overtime after 53 hours worked. And the operative word there is worked. Whereas in this bill, it allows for them to earn hours towards that 42 or the 48, whatever it is, with sick time and vacation time. That means that under the reading of this statute, a firefighter can call out sick for 3 straight days, and that counts towards that 42-hour tally. On the 4th day, they can come into work and earn overtime, either 6 or 8 hours of overtime hours. That is simply unfair, and it deviates from what the federal law and what the federal practice has been, and that we've employed here in our state.
Any other questions for Representative Chippendale?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, thank you. I believe the dialogue with Whip Edwards, a little bit of response to Whip Edwards' question may have answered my question, but I would like you to re-articulate it clearly for someone on my level. In your statement, I'm paraphrasing, of course, because I can't say it word for word, but you said, were this to pass, you would no longer be able to go up to the bargaining table. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more, because I got a little lost on that.
Sure. And if this were to pass, there's nothing legally preventing us from coming to the negotiation table. But the firefighters have been very clear, and they've stated publicly that, during the last round, so when my predecessor took office, they stepped up and they gave concessions. And they mentioned that, they're not going to give concessions. There's nothing legally barring me or legally barring them from coming to the negotiation table, but let's be realistic.
So it was the leverage that you pointed out earlier,
Exactly.
That was what you were referring to?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I understand that, they're concerned about, being brought to the negotiation table, but in all truth, it would be very, very difficult to bring them to the negotiation table if I didn't have that leverage. And now that we're at the negotiation table, look, I believe as a matter of principle that if you're going to work extra hours, you should be paid for those extra hours. Since May 27th, I've been negotiating with them, and I offered to pay them more. Even after May 27th, they've been saying that I refuse to pay them more. That's patently false. Let's look at other cities and towns and how they've done this. 33%, 19%, 19%. I want to come out with something that's fair for everyone. However, if this passes, this resets the baseline and shifts the bargaining leverage so that we'll likely simply walk away.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Mayor Elorza? Representative Humes and Representative Casey.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Mayor, I have just a brief question on the hours worked scenario that you just brought up. Does the City of Providence currently follow the Fair Labor Standards as far as deductions for hours worked and exemptions from hours worked? Or is it, I mean, you mentioned that if this bill were to pass, that days off would be applied to hours worked towards this 42-hour threshold. Are they currently exempted under the Fair Labor Standards?
So under Fair Labor Standards, so you're required to pay overtime to firefighters after 53 hours.
Right.
But that means 53 hours worked. And so under federal law, so if you're out sick, that doesn't count as an hour worked. However, under this bill, anything that is any absences that are allowed under the contract. So if you're allowed to call out sick, if you're allowed to take a vacation, if you're allowed to take a personal day, the way that this is currently drafted, that will count towards those 42 hours or 48 hours or whatever that threshold ends up being. So that language is certainly very worrisome.
Representative Casey.
Thank you, Chairman. Your Honor, just a question. I spent, prior to my current career as a professional firefighter, I spent 21 years in the financial services industry in management, sales, and operations. And I just have a couple of questions regarding your overtime issue in Providence. And you may have inherited it, which I understand, there's nothing you can do about that. However, how many firefighters are you currently staffed?
396.
And what is the actual number you should have?
Well, it depends what your perspective is. So our minimum manning is 94. We have to have 376, total just to meet minimum manning. And so, what we should have, that all depends. We have 23 firefighters on average that call out sick on any given shift. Out of 756 shifts over the past year, there have been only 6 shifts where we haven't had to dip into the costly callback and overtime. So we've costed this out in a lot of different ways. What happens if we hire more firefighters? My predecessor did that. He hired more firefighters. I believe he ran 2 academies. And you see overtime dollars decline, but you see salary dollars increase. The net savings were very, very minimal. It's been said that the problem with overtime is that you have to hire more firefighters. Fine, moving beyond overtime, the truth is the total cost. When you look at total cost of fire services in Rhode Island, that's what places us close to the top of any state in Rhode Island. So it doesn't matter whether it's broken down in overtime or in salary. We can reduce overtime certainly by hiring more firefighters, But that additional cost negates whatever savings we're gonna have. And it virtually nets out. So we've looked at that, we've considered that, and hiring more firefighters will not realize significant savings.
I was just want to represent Jorge Elorza. I'm glad you showed up because I know you're an astute businessman and you run a business with multiple employees. I'm not sure exactly how many, but we're just discussing the issue with staffing. And Providence has an issue with their overtime. And I'm looking actually for an opinion from you, but I don't know if that's appropriate right here. Regarding
In all fairness, Representative Cruz just walked in, so I don't think he was
Great
privy
timing.
to the conversation, so.
We can switch seats.
We can ask him at a later date.
Yeah, that's
Representative Cruz, I assume you want to be marking the affirmative on the votes we took today?
Yes.
So what? Any other questions for Mayor Elorza? Representative Palacio?
Thank you, Mayor, and it's a pleasure to have you at the State House. Currently, you said we have a complement of 396
Correct.
firefighters. Do you think that that's enough? Do you think it's too many? Do you think we need more? In your opinion, I know that you probably have to do some studies and stuff. In your opinion, you've been there for a few months now. I mean, what do you think?
So, in all honesty, I haven't done the analysis of the number of firefighters per capita, and I really don't know where we stand. I've heard anecdotally that we're high compared to other places in the country, but I'm not prepared to speak definitively about that. What I can say is that, you know, this is about the hours that they work. So, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, if you go to a 3-platoon structure, they're going to be working more hours. That's actually not true, and bear with me for one moment. So you have the same number of firefighters working the same number of total hours throughout the year. So it's the same number divided by the same number. What changes, however, is that they'll be working those hours at base pay and not at overtime pay. So the suggestion that I'm not looking to pay them for these extra hours, that's patently false. And even if, and again, I'm not going to negotiate in public, but hypothetically, even if they get paid for every single hour that they work, from the former 42 to the 56, they get paid their base rate, the city will realize significant savings because it'll be at the regular rate and not at the overtime rate. So the total number of hours worked in the fire department will be exactly the same. It's just at what rate will they be paid at? And you know, that's where we highlight the issue here. The issue is the cost in the fire department. And you know, this is something that has existed since, you know, before any of our time. And for perspective and a little bit of context of, you know, why I'm here and why we're at this, I commissioned a long-term fiscal impact report for Providence, and the results were very clear. A conservative estimate that by the year 2021, if we do nothing, Providence is going to be $85 million in the hole. And I'm not going to use the B word, but I will say a certain fiscal collapse. And 2021 is right around the corner. I refuse to kick the can down the road, and we have to start now, we have to start today, making these structural changes. And I'll also say this, even if this goes forward and I'm able to realize these savings in our budgets going forward, that combined with additional parking meter revenue and combined with other steps that we're taking, that only takes us 68% of the way to closing our structural deficit here in Providence. We still have a gap and we still have a long way to go. That's the pressure that I'm facing. But I'll tell you what, if we kick the can down the road, we don't address this issue, or if town managers and mayors aren't able to realize these savings, the fiscal picture is very, very grim. Look, I'm not doing this to cause hardship on anyone. I've been with the firefighters. They're good dudes. They're heroes. I have seen it. It's remarkable what they do every day, and if you haven't done it already, go on fire runs with them. It's remarkable what they do. I'm not doing this to cause hardship on anyone. But we all know that there's a problem with fire overtime in our city and in our state. How long are we going to kick the can down the road? I refuse to do that as mayor, and I'm not going to let that happen.
Representative Luigi was not finished, so let him finish, then we'll Representative Chiuso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it fair to say that if we took the total amount of dollars, speaking of Providence in particular, which is my town, and we paid them the salary as opposed to time and a half, we'd roughly be saving a third of
Exactly.
So what do we spend in Providence in particular? What do we spend in overtime?
Over the past 7 years, we spent an average of $9 million.
So the 9 million would shrink to 6 million?
Yeah, $3 million. So the savings would be $3 million.
Savings.
The cost would be $6 million.
Yeah. Is that, assuming they agreed to that, would that be palatable or not?
So, again, I'm not going to negotiate public, but I will say this, and I've made this commitment publicly. I think that if you're working additional time, you should be paid for that additional time. The question is, are you going to be paid the overtime rate, or are you going to be paid the regular rate?
Thank you.
Representative Chiuso, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, it seems to me, I don't know the first thing about firefighters or unions or anything that goes to that, but it seems to me like the biggest problem is the overtime dollars. Is that correct?
Sure, although the example that I gave, we can add more firefighters and definitely reduce our overtime, but then our salary goes up. So more than that, I would say, is the total dollars in fire services. And that's when you compare Rhode Island to the rest of the country, and we're either at or close to the top. So that the total fire cost.
Now, forgive me for being ignorant on this, but sometimes just thoughts go through my head, and I said, when you have minimum manning hours, so I understand the dynamic of if someone can't come to work, you have to get someone to fill his or her spot. So if you have to abide by that, has anyone in the country anywhere ever discussed maybe doing like you do in schools, have a substitute teacher? Is there such a way to have a mechanism to have a pool of substitute firefighters?
So maybe, let me say this, the work that they do is really incredible. The training that they receive, the shape that they have to be in, I think that would be very difficult. We can explore it, but I think it would be very difficult.
I'm not suggesting that we just get anybody off the streets. It would have to be someone who's trained and has all the certifications. Maybe even a firefighter who happens to be off that works in another town, that's looking for some supplemental income. I mean, that's just a random thought that went through my head.
And so, to be honest with you, I hadn't considered that, but my guess is that would have to be collectively bargained. So I don't think that would be a management way. I could look into it, but that's outside the box thinking.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions for Mayor Elorza? Mayor, thank you for coming to House Labor.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.